Welcome to the Blonde Runner podcast with Coach Laura Erickson, where she shares her healthy living tips as a running and triathlon coach and mother of 4.
Hello friends, it's Coach Laura here, and I wanted to cover coping with race nerves and anxiety. I recently did a race, and I have been running for well over 30 years, racing and competing, and I still get nervous for races. A matter of fact, I get nervous too when I do hard workouts by myself. So I've had to learn how to deal with anxiety. I'm kind of an anxious person anyway, and I've had to learn how to deal with these race nerves and anxiety. So wanted to share some stories and maybe some tips that will help you out. So like I said, I've always been quite nervous before races, and I guess it was really apparent when I ran in college, since my college coaches, it was indoor track, and I remember vividly what races I was signed up to do. And right before one of the races I was not signed up to do, the coach came over and said, "Hey girls, it's time to warm up." And they're like, and he said to me, "You too, Laura." And I'm like, "What? I'm not even doing this race. You're going to have me do this race. I didn't even know about it." And I was, real nervous for that race. I always get nervous anyway, but that really shot my nerves up. Matter of fact, I did not do well in that race. I think for me, I learned from that experience that race anxiety actually helps me prepare for races. So yes, I get really nervous, and the way I like to look at it is I get nervous because I care. And that's what I like to tell people that get nervous for races. It's because you care. It matters to you how you do. And maybe you don't have a lot of race anxiety, but there's very few people I know, matter of fact, nobody that I know that doesn't get nervous for races. So, but I do think I have since learned how to cope with it a little bit better. And so I wanted to share some tips with you. First and foremost, like I said, I still get nervous. But one thing I've learned to do is not make it so obvious to other people that I'm really nervous about racing. So it's kind of like a duck, you know how they're just smooth on the surface? They look really like, they're very calm. But underneath the water, those little feet are really paddling quickly. And so now that's how I manage my anxiety. It's not as visible, but inside I am a lot more anxious. But one of the things that I've learned to do is to reframe that nervous emotion to excitement. Because honestly, before a race, how you feel, maybe your palms are sweaty and your heart is racing a little bit and you can't think straight. You know how it is before a race. You get a little anxious like that. That's how do you feel when you're excited for something. Your palms sweat, your heart rate goes up, you can't think quite straight. Excitement and anxiety or race anxiety feels the same. But in my mind, when I tell myself, I am excited to race, this is awesome, I get to do this, and I kind of approach it with gratitude, I'm going to have more fun that way, and 2, it's going to help me cope with the anxiety I'm feeling and facing at the time. If I think, I'm so nervous, I don't know if I can do this, and I start going down the road of negativity or self-doubt, and that's a problem. And I see this a lot with the junior high kids that I coach, is some of them just get so nervous that they shut down. And once we start thinking of it differently, reframing it differently, they do a lot better because they're looking at it as an opportunity to do something, and it's exciting, and wow, they get to do this, and that kind of a thing. They do way better. So I've really discovered that really helps me a lot too. It's just coming into a race with gratitude that you can do it, because there are people that would love to be able to race. They're stuck in a wheelchair. They can't. And so for that reason, it really helps for me to reframe it into, this is an opportunity. This is something I get to do. And that's great. That really helps me. So another thing I like to talk about, so obviously part of that race anxiety, you get a lot of jitters. And if you saw my post announcing this podcast, the picture on Instagram, you'll notice that I'm standing by a honey bucket. Yeah, that's right. Absolutely, you're going to be visiting the bathroom. So there are some things that will help with that. There are some people that have those type of issues when they race, when they have to go to the bathroom. And running stimulates smooth muscle tissue, which is the lining of the intestine, which often makes you have to use the restroom. There are medications that can help with that. Part of racing is just making sure you empty your bowels before you race. I think it really helps you don't want to have excessive amounts of fiber the day before, or of course that morning. You're looking for simple, easily digestible carbohydrates. And obviously avoid things you're allergic to. If you can't tolerate gluten, don't have that. Don't have it on the regular anyway. And then also obviously dairy or anything like that. Dairy is usually not something good to have before races. Caffeinated things also can be a diuretic and make you have to go to the bathroom more. So you can help that with some of the dietary things. Find what works well for you. Things that work well for me before racing. And by the way, I do have this a blog article on this on my website at blonderunner.com. So if you're needing to or have a refresher or you like it written down to see, I think the biggest thing is really testing and trying things in training and see what works well for you. I do a lot of time trial efforts on my own, which is kind of a race effort. I call it a dress rehearsal. Often I will actually put on the clothes I race in before races and then test myself to see if that outfit works well. Do I have chafing points? Then I also eat like I would before a race. And that is how I can test before an actual race if that food product works well for me. And sometimes my stomach is just a little more jumpy than other times. Sometimes my stomach doesn't want to digest as well. I think sometimes that comes with anxiety. So making sure you're having foods that absorb the acid, I would say. Sometimes toast with cinnamon really helps with that for me. Other things that I'll have is like a granola bar. Some people do peanut butter and jelly sandwiches before races, which is fine. I try to go a little lighter on, you don't want a lot of protein and you don't want a lot of high fat. Mostly you want carbohydrates before racing, and so generally I'm not a believer in having naked carbs or carbs with no other things in them, no other macronutrients, like just a banana. But before a race, that's a very good thing to have, is just a banana without other things, because it's going to be utilized right away. For me, I have to be careful not to shoot my blood sugar up too quickly, and so that's why I don't like to do just carbs, but before a race I would. Other things I like to have is like cinnamon applesauce is really easily digestible. I do have a post on my Instagram accounts at The Blonde Runner and Coach Laura Erickson, it's Lora, and I talk about marathon nutrition and I talk about the different foods that you can have in a race. So definitely check that one out as well. But foods, of course, are going to affect how much you have to use the bathroom. So that's going to be something you need to consider. Another thing I like, and I will post about this more too, is you're going to have to go to the bathroom usually several times before a race. And sometimes you can chafe your bum, really. I don't know about you guys, but it doesn't matter what brand of the porta potties they use. Often the brand of toilet paper is rough, and it's usually very thin, and I think that's so it can break down easily. But it's not very forgiving on your skin, your sensitive undercarriage skin. And so I am a fan of bringing my own wipes. I use the Clean Freak. They have the portable flusher wipes. They're smaller and they're just individually packaged. I like those. It makes me feel fresh and it keeps me from wiping my bum raw before race, because I use the restrooms often before races, and I think most people do. I do have a discount code for those wipes. You can use the code RUNBLONDE, and that's all in capitals with an E on the end. Again, those are Clean Freak wipes. Anyway, I'll put the link in my description. It's all over my social media. You can find it on my website as well. But these are just some of the products that I love and I think are really useful. And they save my rump, man. I don't want any chafing down there. Running is hard enough. Running is difficult. Obviously, that's why we do it. It also yields to a lot of confidence and, of course, builds our, helps with our health and things. But you don't want it to be any more difficult than it is. You want to run as comfortably as you can. If you ever had chafing there, If you cycle or anything, yeah, you definitely want to you can use shaving cream as well, but definitely make sure that you keep yourself clean and that you aren't rubbing yourself raw. So, another thing that I think really helps with race anxiety, I don't know about you, but I've seen a lot of people do this too, where they listen to music before races, which is awesome. And even more importantly, often when I'm heading to races, I will turn on my music, and it's my pumping up music, and I'm singing along. And I love that because it gets me excited about it. Again, I'm reframing that. I'm nervous, but I'm excited, right, for that race. And then it's usually just lyrics that are a little sassy, and it's just getting me in the frame of mind that I need. Also, singing along with it is good. Humming is also really good because it stimulates the vagus nerve, that movement of the vocal cords. And so that actually has a calming effect. Even though you're excited, there's kind of that excitement, that controlled excitement. And that's what you want, is controlled excitement. And so I'm a big believer in music. Often I will not put myself in the mix being around a lot of people that are super anxious. And I know I had friends in college, and they will attest to this. They could not be around me before races because I was too nervous for them. And I often don't always want to be around all the nervous people before a race. I love it after, like, we're done and we can chat, and it's great to know people and get to know people. And I'm around them a little bit before the race, but if I can put myself, sometimes I'll get away and I'll just do some humming to myself. Some really good tips just for general anxiety is meditation. I'll often, get away from the crowds before a race and just visualize my race again. Kind of any mantras that I've established for that race, I often write them on my forearm. But I also, I have sort of a meaning. Often I will put an acronym, whatever theme I have for that race, whatever I'm focusing on. Maybe it's tied to my goals, but I'll do a little meditation. That helps in a general sense. I do that often with anxiety, is learning how to meditate and be present. Usually anxiety has to do with the past or the future. And so if you learn how to be more present and live in the present, because that's what you need to do to compete well, is be present, be in the moment, at the moment. And that is something that is a skill that can be learned, and it can be practiced. And I think learning to practice that skill is so valuable. And meditation is one of the ways you can do that. Literally 10 minutes a day. Anyway, if you have questions on that, message me, DM me, and I will give you more tips on that. We're definitely going to be talking about that more. Another thing that really helps me, and maybe I learned this from Mel Robbins, she always has you do a count. I think counting is very logical. It's very left brain. Sometimes when we work in the right brain and everything is so emotional, we don't do as well as we would if we just kind of made sense of things to ourselves. And sometimes it's just like, calm down, take a deep breath. A lot of times I'll literally, if I'm feeling really anxious at home, whatever it is, even like before races too, I will slow my movements and be very distinct and deliberate. It makes me feel like I'm in control. It calms me down to just slow down. And often I'll also just stop putting so much pressure on myself. I think pressure is good. You want to push yourself to do well. But too much pressure it's like blowing a gasket, right? It's too much. And so sometimes you just need to step back. And usually it's us putting pressure on ourselves, or we're so worried about what other people might do or say if we don't do bad. But then our focus is on that black dot on a white piece of paper, right? We need to think about all the good things that could happen if we do really well. So that's a good thing to meditate on, or take a moment and slow down and say, you got this, you can do this, it's going to be all right. Really, the hardest part of any race is just right before it begins, in my opinion, right? You're doing a countdown, or it's right before. Then all that gun goes off, you get started, and then you just get into your groove, and you're fine. So, usually it's a short-lived thing. And I think that's a good way to frame it as well, as it's very short amount of time that you're going to be really, really nervous, like really nervous, right? So, or excited, right? Really, really excited. And so give yourself a few minutes to get through that, and then it's going to be done, and you're going to be running, and everything's great when you run. And another thing is to think about having fun. Like, why are you doing this? I don't think people sign up so that they can be anxious and, blowing a gasket and so nervous and they're not enjoying it. They're doing it. I think the most enjoyable part is actually running down the finish chute, right? And finishing and being with your friends and being around with other people that have pushed themselves and that understand where you're coming from. Because we know there are people that do not run and don't understand why we do triathlons or things like this. But it's nice to be around people that are. So there's obviously a reason why we do it. We don't just do it for the t-shirts or the medal or, the bling. We do it because it's something in us that drives us to do better or reach new milestones. For me, it's a health thing. I have a lot of diabetes in my family. I do not want to deal with that, so that it definitely helps me stay in shape. So, but if you're trying to do these things, you're going to be dealing with a little bit of race nerves, a little bit of anxiety. So definitely do a deep dive and research into how you can help yourself. These are some of the tips that have helped me over the years. You just have to find the things that will work for you. But maybe if you haven't tried these things before, give them a try and then let me know how you're doing. Tell me how it's going. Until next time, live well. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Healthy Living Podcast. Be sure and check the show notes for resources or links that we mentioned in the show. You can also find them on my website at blonderunner.com. BLONDERUNNER.com. You can also find me on Instagram at TheBlondeRunner with an E and Coach Laura Erickson, and that's LORA. Before you forget, I hope that you will follow this podcast and like it so you don't miss an episode. Also, it really helps if you leave a review so other people can find it, and share it with your friends. Until next time, live well.